Hey everybody, happy Friday afternoon. If I'm speaking a little lower on the vocal level, it's because, it's Thursday evening for me and my kids are laying down. I got to get up early and go to Europe, but here we go. This one's entitled The Book That Changed My Life. You know, one of the most common questions I get is, what books shaped you, McConaughey? And look, I could name a few, but the one that mattered most wasn't one that I went looking for. It was one that came looking for me. It was the end of my sophomore year in college. Final exams were looming, and I was not sleeping well. Not because of my mattress, but because of my mind. I was having doubts about my plans to become a lawyer. The math didn't add up. 4 years of undergrad, and I'd be 23. And then 3 more years at law school, and I'd be 26. And before I'd get out, I had to get a job. I wouldn't start making my mark in this world until I was almost 30 years old. I didn't want to miss my 20s preparing for the rest of my life. I'd also been writing short stories in my journals. I passed a few off to my good friend Rob Bendler. He was a film student at NYU, who attested that they were original and worth sharing. Thought about film school, he asked me. You're a good storyteller. Film school, I said, wait a minute, that sounds flattering, but it also sounds foreign, almost European, radical, irresponsible, indulgent, and artsy even. I couldn't even get the idea into the dialect of my dreams, much less consider it as a rational aspiration. I said, it's not for me. A few hours before my psychology final exam, I showed up at my fraternity. I grabbed lunch and I went across the back alley to a couple of fellow Delt brothers' place so I could finish studying. They were both sleeping in bunk beds because they pulled all-nighters cramming. I sat on the couch and I opened my textbook. And you gotta understand, I was a diligent studier. I would use every spare second I had to prepare for a test. And I took great pride in being composed and ready for any exam. Yeah, I made a lot of A's. But on this day, at this time, for some reason, with the exam only a few hours away, I shut the textbooks. I said to myself, you got this, McConaughey. Just put the textbook away. And I did. I also put my notes in my backpack. And I decided to turn on the TV. ESPN. Yeah, baby. I love sports. I'm telling you, I will watch the world's strongest man competition if that's all that's on. I'll watch cricket, bro. Today, there was a baseball game on. Even better. But for some reason, after 5 minutes of watching, I shut the TV off. Wasn't interested. I looked around the room. On the floor to the left of me was a stack of magazines. Playboys. Hustlers. Ooh, yeah, I like looking at naked women. But for some reason, not today. I wasn't interested. As I flipped about 7 magazines deep into the pile, I suddenly came across a small paperback book. It had a white cover with a handsome red curve-like title that read, The Greatest Salesman in the World. Well, who's that? I wondered as I picked it up from the pile and began to read. 2.5 hours later, I got to the first scroll in the book. The book had just revealed to me that the title was referring to the reader of the book. In this instance, and now my instructions were to read each scroll 3 times a day for 30 days before moving on to the next one. Suddenly I looked at my watch. My exam was in 20 minutes. I packed my stuff in my backpack and I rustled my friend from his bunk and I said, hey, Braden, wake up, babe up. Hey, can I borrow this book? Through sleepy eyes, he kind of woke up. He looked at me and said, no, man, you can have it. I left, book in hand, and made it to my test on time. Something about this book, the title, the story so far, the mystery of the 10 scrolls, it just felt special, like it had found me. I rushed through my exam. I did not care about psychology class, and I did not care what grade I made. I only cared about reading that first scroll. Somehow I knew that something bigger than a classroom exam laid within the pages of this book. Scroll number 1. I will form good habits and become their slave. Suddenly it occurred to me that it was a bad habit to keep lying to myself. To keep lying to myself about becoming a lawyer. That was what I was expected to be and what path I was on. And it hit me that was not for me. No, I wanted to tell stories. Yeah, that book has stayed with me ever since. One of the few I ever recommend. It was the first nudge that gave me permission to choose story over statute, imagination over litigation. And I've been telling stories ever since. Sometimes on film, sometimes in print. All because I stumbled on a paperback in a stack of magazines and didn't want to watch the baseball game. Thank you, Braden. Just keep living, folks. Go looking for them, but also be open to them finding you.